This innocuous little pin is changing my mind around router tables. Stick around and I'll tell you why, and I'll show you how I use it. How's it? My name is Dylan, and in this edition of Ply Creations we are talking router table safety. More particularly using a router or a starting pin on your router table. I've admitted on this channel that I've had a bad kickback on my table saw. I've had bad catches on my lathe, especially when skews are involved. But it's the catches that I've gotten on my router table that has caused me to seriously reconsider the sanity of using an upside down router in my workshop. Now, I'm fully aware that a router table is probably one of the most versatile tools in any modern workshop, but it terrifies me, or at least it used to, until I discovered starting pins. My table saw, one of the wings allows me to mount a router and use it as a router table, and it's a really nice setup. But the table saw didn't come with starting pins, and I got initially one or two really bad catches, and I've been avoiding using the router table ever since, or at least until I discovered these. Of course, the table saw, as I mentioned, didn't come with a pin, so that necessitated me making my own. And I turned this funky one from a cut-off acrylic pen blank. By the way, if you'd like to see my router table setup in more detail, or if you'd like me to show you how I made one of these, drop me a note in the comment section and I'll see if I can slot a session into my filming schedule and show you either one of those. But back to avoiding the router table. This year I was contracted by a local taxidermist to make some shields for them that they mount the trophies to. And I'm actually busy with a second order I've received from them. 90% of the work on these projects is template routing, either from using a template and then a flush trim bit, or adding a Roman OG shape to the extremities of the shield. However, what I have found is that one of these isn't a guarantee that you won't be getting any catches. So I will be showing you how I use it in a short production run on a few shields. But what I want to show you first is how the grain direction of something like the shield, a complex shape, how that can affect or how that can result in getting catches even if you are using a pin. So I'll take you over to the router table and I'll show you one of the blanks and I'll show you what you need to be careful of. So I'll see you at the router table. Let's have a look at grain direction and see how that could potentially result in not only tear out but also a catch, even if you are using a starter pin. Now, this is typically what a blank of the shields would look like, and you can see it's a rather complicated shape and there's a lot of opportunity for going against the grain and therefore getting a catch. Now, I usually start my cuts on this edge here, and I'll show you why. I've indicated with my white pencil the grain direction. Now, the bit turns in an anti-clockwise direction in use. Whenever you are setting up any one of your cutting tools or power tools, be careful. Not only unplug it or switch it off, but also unplug it. It's really for your own safety. Now, because the bit turns in an anti-clockwise direction, feeding direction on a router table is going to be from my right to my left. Now, looking at the grain direction here is the cut will enter, or the cutting edge will enter in this, say, area and then exit behind the bit, and I've already marked it there. Now, on the exit cut, the grain behind the cutting edge will support the cutting edge or support the fibers in front of that cutting edge, and therefore limit the amount of tear out that I get, giving me a smooth catch-free cut. If, and this has happened, if I start the cut on the other side of the shield, you'll now see that the grain runs down in this direction, and what effectively happens, is as I'm feeding the blank through, the cutting edge is getting in under the grain and wants to tear it out. Now, that's the best case scenario. And the worst case scenario is you will get a catch, even if you use a pin. Don't have the pin installed at the moment. So I'll go ahead, I'll put the templates on 4 blanks. I'll quickly show you what a production run looks like while using a pin, and I'll show you that particular process. I'll be placing my workpiece on the router table, and I'll be feeding it through using a push block, DIY. Made this one, have a video on my channel, and I'll share or give you the link on the screen. But I'll place the push block down and so I can have downward pressure. What I'll do then is I will place the workpiece against the starting pin and then pivot the edge at which I'll start the cut into the rotating bit. What that allows me to do is have a lot of control in this, the speed at which I'm feeding into the cutting bit. For some of the other reason is when we are pushing the workpiece into the bit, we tend to do it too quickly, and that often will then result in a catch. So I'll start at the pin and then pivot into the cutting bit and then proceed with my cut in the direction as demonstrated earlier. Of course, keeping in mind where I start the cut on the shield so I avoid going against the grain. Now, you may notice that I've a little bit limited in space on my router table. Something you would very much like to avoid is that in the cutting process, you get the workpiece in between your rotating cutter and your pin. That can get quite scary. I then start the cut on the shields that I'm working on, get the cut a few inches long, say 2 inches, a few centimeters or millimeters. I then go through all my shields and then I remove the pin, and that then allows me a lot of space or more space to be able to make my cuts. Now, some of the shields are significantly larger than others, and some of them are even larger still. Now then I have the space, I've already started the cut, and then starting in the same area, I reinitialize the position of the cutter against the template and then go on with the cut. When you do the cuts and you've got a starter pin on your router table, it's not necessary to stay against the starter pin once you have initiated the cut, and as a result it is then safe to start the cut where you've already removed material and then proceed with the cut as you would do normally, and then I do work through all the shields. How did I get to this point where I can start shaping the shields? Of course, I process the raw material. I then place the template onto my blank. I trace it with a marker or a Sharpie, go over to the bandsaw, and then I stay outside of the Sharpie line when I cut out the rough shape. The remaining line formed by the Sharpie is just the right amount of material to safely remove and start the process on the shields. I find that that works quite well. Not my idea, I found that on another content creator's channel when I was researching template routing and so forth. So I'll be taking you through the process of making these or getting the flush cut in shape. And then I'll move over to the Roman OG and I'll show you how the pin is used in that process as well. So sit back, relax, and watch me do a short production run. on to using the OG bit, and really no difference apart from the fact that previously I was running the flush cut bit against the template, and this time I've got the final shield in shape. Same process, I've got the pin installed, pivot into the cutter, remove a few centimeters or a couple of inches of material, run through all the shields, remove the pin, finish off around all the shields, and then apart from a quick sand, ready to go to the customer. 5 shields down, and I think I've got about 26 or 27 left to go in this order. This little pin, slowly but surely convincing me that there may be a place for upside down routers in my workshop after all. By the way, reminder, if you'd like me to show you how I made this, drop me a note in the comment section. If you've enjoyed this episode or enjoy any of the other episodes on my channel, please consider liking and subscribing. It helps other woodworkers or people who'd like to work with their hands. It helps them find my channel. But at the end of this edition of Ply Creations, I'd like to thank you for joining me in my workshop. As always, it was a pleasure to have you here with me. Be safe in your own workshop. And as a final note, try not to be afraid of your equipment and machines. Respect them, but not afraid. I hope you have a good one. Until I see you next time. Cheers.